everybody. You're listening to Syncretism with Santos Bonacci, and once again, my name is David Whitehead, and I'm coming to you live from Toronto, Canada, and I'm just standing in for Santos tonight. In fact, this will be the last night that I'm standing in for Santos. He should be back regular schedule next week, as far as I know. And before we get started with the show, I just wanted to say a personal thank you to both Santos Bonacci and American Freedom Radio for giving me this excellent opportunity. I've been able to speak with some of my mentors and some just fascinating people that I've actually learned a lot from. So this has been, very much a learning experience for myself. And I'm just absolutely honored to have been taking part in it. And I think it's very exciting that tonight, being the last show that I'm hosting for Santos, that we get to speak with none other than Mark Passio from whatonearthishappening.com. And it's, regarding Mark's work, he's been so instrumental for me personally. Whether he knows it or not, he's been a great teacher in my journey in doing this research and expanding my awareness and my consciousness, and he's an inspiration to me. I very much look at him as a warrior of truth. He speaks eloquently and with passion, and I'm just very excited to be able to speak to him tonight. He just finished up his latest conference, the Free Your Mind 2 conference, so we're going to get into that and some other fascinating things. So without further ado, Mark, welcome, brother, and thanks again for taking this call.
David, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here with you on Syncretism today.
Oh, wow. Like it's, like I said, just to be able to speak to you, and I really wish I could have been attending your conference in person, but I wasn't able to get down to Philadelphia, but I was there in spirit. I love all of the speakers that you had in attendance, and maybe you can tell the listeners a little bit about how that conference went and some of the topics that were discussed.
Sure, absolutely. I would say that the Free Your Mind 2 conference vastly surpassed my wildest expectations, and it was just arguably the greatest thing that I've ever been involved with. That's all I can say about it. I mean, it's just even beyond words. The speakers were phenomenal. The information that they shared was absolutely empowering. Everybody's presentations just floored me. And people are just going to, it's going to really have an impact when these videos hit the world after they're released. We're still working on editing them and getting them out there to people. But all of the speakers were just great. The crowd that showed up was very high consciousness and high energy. And it was just a beautiful time. I mean, I tell other people that if the world were comprised of the kind of people that turned out for the Free Your Mind 2 conference, there would be no problems. I mean, we would basically be living in a veritable paradise. And that's our goal, is to try to get this information out to people and help them to become like people like that. So the energy was just so high, and I think it radiated out from that event. Like, that was the nucleus, and the energy is, we're still feeling the reverberations of it today. The speakers who spoke at the event, I mean, you had people like Freeman, you had Larkin Rose, who did a phenomenal job. Fritz Springmeier, this was his first public talk since, being released from prison. This was the first, public conference that he's done. Jay Parker blew everybody away with information that he shared about insider information coming from, an occult, a dark occult family, and naming names and places, and just, absolutely courageously telling the truth about his experiences. Of course, Laura Eisenhower, she always brings phenomenal information to the table. Lennon Honor, I think, blew everybody away with his 9/11 analysis about it being a trauma-based mind control ritual. You had Kathy O'Brien and Mark Phillips. This is the first big event that they've talked at some time, and basically we're saying that this is going to be the last public speaking event that they were both brilliant. Frater Rex, of course, another host right here on American Freedom Radio, as well as Alex Ansary. And, I could just go on and on, but the best thing for people to do is check out the conference website at freeyourmindconference.com. And when the videos come out, we'll be releasing them in the next couple of months, most likely. Definitely get up there and check them out, because you will learn a lot, and share it with other people. It's incredibly empowering information. Like I said, this event, I could not have asked for it to go any better. It was probably the greatest thing that I've ever personally been involved with, and probably the best event that I've personally attended myself as well.
Oh, wow. That's terrific. And to those that are listening, you absolutely must go and support Mark's work and the work of these great teachers and speakers and this event, because we are living in the greatest period in human history, as I feel. And I think that, we wouldn't have the ability to have these kinds of events where like-minded people that are empowered with knowledge and awareness and understanding and compassion and courage to get up there and to speak their truth and bring that information out. We wouldn't have had that opportunity in the past to be able to not only have a conference where people can just come and gather to bring that energy together, but also to now be able to spread that around the internet, and so that it can reach thousands, if not millions, of more people. So, I salute you, Mark, for putting that together. I know putting some of these events together can be quite stressful, and I'm just really glad to hear it really worked out great.
Oh, yeah. Don't get me wrong. It was challenging. It was a lot of work. I mean, people came together, and put endless hours of work to make this happen. Personal resources. I always want to mention Michael Falsetta, without whose assistance this conference would not have occurred. There's people behind the scenes, organizers that, they put time, dedication, and heart into this to make this happen. And I commend them all for doing so, and they all did a great job. No one at all dropped the ball. They all came together and did their part to make this an event to be remembered for years to come.
Wow, that's excellent. I'm so glad to hear it, Mark, and I'm sure we'll be looking forward to future events like this, possibly maybe next year or something like that. Do you have any plans for anything coming up?
Well, my plans, I personally wish to step back from conference organizing. I would like someone to take those reins from me so I could focus on presenting and, do as good of a job as I possibly can with that. So I'm kind of looking to hand this off to someone, and I have some ideas in mind, but I haven't made any decisions yet. This conference was never intended to be a yearly event. When we first put it together, looked at it as something that we wanted to do bi-yearly to make it more special and not have it just be every single year. So we figured odd years let's do. I'd like to see it kept bi-yearly, be like a bigger event on a bi-yearly basis instead of every year. So that's kind of my vision of it, but I don't know what form it's going to take in the future. I'm just going to kind of let that organically unfold when I find someone that has the skill set to pass this off to, and I know it would be in good hands with.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I'm sure that, synchronicity has a funny way of working out, and I'm sure you'll find the right people to work with you. And, so we wish you all the best in that regard.
I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And if anybody's listening, if you got any ideas, let us know. But tonight, Mark, I wanted to start with the concept of natural law and just kind of go from there. And I personally feel that, and maybe there's people listening that might maybe not understand what we're talking about, although Santos does cover that a lot on the show. But the way that you speak about it and bring it up and introduce it to people, natural law versus the law of man, or the sort of synthetically imposed law that we're all experiencing. And maybe we can just get into the details of that and your take on the differences and what we can do to move forward into something that's going to benefit everybody.
Sure. And David, I want to thank you for just jumping right into that topic, because to tell you the truth, instead of talking about me, my background, or even what the current projects that I have going are, the thing that I like to talk about the most and get right into is this topic of natural law, because it is the most important information that could possibly be shared. And I feel like this is why I'm doing what I'm doing, to bring this particular information forward. And the first thing that we, of course, should talk about when we talk about this topic is, let's talk about words, okay? Because when you say this phrase, almost like an immediate instinctual reaction Okay, the reactive mind goes into work, and people start thinking about their connotative definition that they're holding in their mind for these words. So let me just clear up at the very beginning that when I say natural law, whatever you happen to be thinking of regarding a particular philosophy or a set of teachings, by an individual, or even thinking about the word natural in the capacity that a lot of people think about it, meaning having to do with this idea that people hold in their mind about the natural order of things. And almost invariably, that natural order that they are thinking of is Darwinian in its scope, in its nature. Okay, and that's not what we're talking about here. We are not talking about the law of the jungle, so to speak, where the animal with the sharpest teeth and biggest claws wins because it can dominate. We're talking about the exact opposite of that, actually. When I say the word natural, I mean it in its pure, simplistic definition. I'm talking about natural as inherent, meaning it's not made by mankind. It has its basis in nature. Very simply, that's all we're talking about here. That it's not dependent upon the perception of mankind. That its existence does not depend on what anyone thinks of it or believes about it. And it is its basis lies in reality and truth. That's what we mean by the word natural here in this context. And I tell people the root of the word natural, it comes from the ancient Egyptian language, the people of Chem. Okay, what Egypt used to be called before the Greeks named it Hegyptos, and then it became called Egypt eventually. The word natural comes from out of Chem, ancient Egypt, and it has its roots in the Egyptian word neter. Neter meant spirit or God in ancient Egyptian. So the word natural actually means spiritual. It means having a basis in spiritual reality, okay? Having a basis that is fundamental to creation. That's what the word natural really means. So that's all we're talking about when we use the word natural in this context. Now, the word law, we should define as well. Law, any law it is a condition that exists. So it is an existing condition that is both binding and immutable. A binding condition, this means that it has an effect, and the effect that it has is also not dependent on perception. In other words, gravity is a law, okay? It's an existing condition that is binding. On Earth, you are subject to a 1g gravitational force. And it doesn't make a difference whether you believe that, whether you understand it, whether you know it's an effect or not. It is binding upon you. It has an effect on you. So that's the first condition of a law. The second condition of a law is that it is immutable. Okay? The second defining characteristic of the condition called law is that it is immutable. The word immutable means that it cannot be changed. It doesn't matter whether you agree with it, understand it, believe in it. There's nothing that you can do to change it. It exists. Okay? It exists, and it can't be changed by man because man did not put it into effect. So this is what we're talking about when we talk about natural law. Now, if we put them both together, we put these two phrases together, we're talking about inherent, something that is inherent, that is not made or caused by humanity. But it's not made or caused by any physical beings at all. It's a force of nature that is an existing condition that is both binding and immutable. It cannot be changed by humanity either. So it wasn't caused by humanity, and it cannot be changed by humanity. This is what we are calling natural law. Now, because the word natural has been so co-opted and misunderstood and obfuscated deliberately by tactics of repetition and obfuscation, okay? You keep repeating the same thing over and over and over again to get people to think that it means something that it does not. So natural has been continuously associated with this erroneous notion of the Darwinian natural order that has absolutely nothing to do with reality at all in the context we're talking about natural law. Again, we're not talking about Darwinism. We're not talking about the quote-unquote natural order that most people believe in. We're not talking about any particular single philosophy by different philosophers such as John Locke, who used the term natural law. We're not talking about any of those things. So to clear this up, what I've kind of started telling people is that a better word for natural law is simply cosmic spiritual law or universal spiritual law. Spiritual laws that exist universally throughout the entire cosmos. No matter where you go, they are in effect. And what these laws ultimately govern. And here's the thing that is really the rub when it comes to natural law. This is the deep context that we need to understand about natural law, is that what it governs is the consequences or the results of behaviors that are chosen by beings. Okay, so we have a free will to choose certain behaviors. We can choose to act certain ways. When we choose to act in certain ways, these governing conditions, these governing dynamics that are laws actually go to work. They go into effect based on the behaviors that we have chosen and ultimately bring us the experiences that then we have to live with, that we have to go through based on what we chose and how we chose to behave. So a working definition that I like to give people for natural law is that what it actually is the universal, non-man-made, binding, and immutable conditions that govern the consequences of behavior.
Wow. Well, that fit in perfectly, Mark. That was a great introduction to tonight's topic, and we got the break coming on, so don't go anywhere, folks. We're here with Mark Passio. You're listening to American Freedom Radio. We'll be back in a few short minutes, so stay put. Listen to American Freedom Radio. We're here on with Syncretism with Santos Bonacci. I'm speaking to my guest tonight, Mark Passio, and just before the break, Mark was bringing in the definition of natural law, and we're just going to get into that topic tonight and break it down. I think it's very, very important, and I don't think anybody really explains it as eloquently as Mark does. So, Mark, let's continue on that track. We've defined the terms. Where should we go from here?
Okay, so basically, what people have to understand is that what natural law is the governing dynamics regarding behavior. See, there's governing dynamics in every other aspect of the universe. You know, there's laws that govern the movements of galaxies, the stars, the planets, thermodynamics, electromagnetism, etc. Humans, for some reason, think that they exist and operate outside of law in general. You know, that there's not going to be any governing dynamics to behavior. They think that the only thing that could possibly govern that is laws that man makes up and writes down and then tries to enforce. And we should make a very clear distinction that what we're talking about has absolutely nothing whatsoever to do with the laws of man. This is the antithesis of the laws of man. It's the polar opposite, diametrically opposed to the laws of man. We're talking about something that it would still exist if suddenly the earth were to disappear and all the people on it disappeared immediately with the earth. Natural law would still exist in the cosmos. There's nothing that can be done to remove natural law from the universe because it is one with the universe and it is created by the universe itself. You have to look at natural law as the boundary conditions that exist in the universe that are governing dynamics related to behavior. So this is something that exists inherently and can never be retracted, can never be taken away or done away with. You would have to destroy the entire universe to destroy these laws that we're speaking of. So when you tell people this, there's an immediate, there's usually, if the person is not open to hearing the information with an open mind and has not really ever really thought about this, there's usually a backlash in people's minds. There's a immediate conflict that takes place because people don't like hearing that they are bound by something. They want to think that they can do whatever they want without consequence. Well, we have free will. Free will is the randomness component to the universe. See, a lot of people fall into the camp of total randomness, and then other people fall into the camp of total determinism. These are two opposing worldviews that often create a schism between people and, create tension. There are components to the universe that are deterministic, and there are components to the universe that are random. The random component is free will. This is what we use to make our choices as to how we will behave. And then there is a deterministic component to the universe that is natural law. It exists and it operates the same way at all times and places, and it is the binding, governing condition that acts as the boundary conditions that govern free will choices. So yes, there is free will, and there's a randomness component to free will decisions because we can choose whatever we want to choose to do. But there's no such thing as free will without consequence, because the random component called free will is always balanced and governed by natural law, which is the deterministic component to creation. So these two dynamics play against each other, okay? And they go hand in hand. They're both true. So when people say, is there free will? Absolutely, there is free will. It exists in the universe. It is also inherent to the universe. The creations of the universe, as thinking beings that we are, human beings, we have free will. We can make decisions, we can think, we can come to our own conclusions about things, and then act in free will in every moment. However, there's no such thing as free will without consequence, because natural law is always in effect. And it always ultimately binds the choices that we make to bring us the results of that choice we need, that we experience, and as a result, learn and grow from. So one of the things that this has been called in other schools of thought is consequentialism. And I very much agree that consequentialism it's very similar, if not identical, to what I'm talking about when I talk about natural law. If you want to look up any particular ideology, philosophy that has to do with natural law, consequentialism would be something that is nearly identical to what I'm talking about here. Okay, and this is basically saying that there are always consequences to the actions that we choose. Now, we can come to know how natural law operates. It is a science. As a law, knowing about it is a science. It's not a belief system. So often people will immediately say, well, this is a belief. It's religious. It's a religious belief. You're saying that, that you believe that this exists. No, that's not what I'm saying. I do not believe in natural law. I know that natural law exists. It is knowledge that is there to be discovered. It has nothing to do with a belief system that is there to be proselytized or pushed off onto people. I only talk about natural law because I'm attempting to help other people to come to discover it on their own. I talk about natural law in the sense that if someone who lived in a zero-G field, let's say in another place in the universe there was zero-G life, meaning that there was no gravitational fields where these beings lived. They came onto the earth, they knew nothing about gravity. Okay, so they were able to exist in a 1G field and walk around, and they came to a cliff and they were getting ready to walk over the edge of the cliff. I would attempt to explain to those beings what gravity is and say, you might want to rethink your decision to just walk over there because more than likely than not, you're going to end up dead. And that's all I'm doing here, is attempting to explain to people that there are laws in existence that you are bound by, and that if you attempt to flagrantly violate without thinking about or considering the consequences will more likely than not be very dire. This, however, has nothing to do with a belief system on my part. This is not my religion. I happen to have discovered this and I'm nothing special in that regard. This doesn't exist because I say it exists, no more than gravity exists because I say it exists. I can say that it exists, and that's true, but me saying that has nothing to do with its existence. Okay, and you can know gravity, and you can quantify it, and you can understand how it operates because it's governed by laws, which we can model and write down as equations. Well, we can do the same thing when it comes to natural law. So it's very important to establish that belief is not required. As a matter of fact, belief is not only not required when it comes to the understanding of natural law, belief is completely irrelevant when it comes to the understanding of natural law. It doesn't matter whether anyone believes in natural law or not. As laws, they are always in existence, always operating, and do not require anyone's belief. So other things that natural law have been called, other than consequentialism, is in various different occult traditions and mystical traditions, it's been called many different things. One of them is the laws of cause and effect. And this has been stated scientifically, that effect invariably follows cause. There's a dynamic of causality that underlies anything that happens. Okay? So for an effect to manifest in the physical plane, there has to be some sort of underlying causal factor that generated that manifestation. So effect invariably follows cause. For every action, there exists an equal and opposing reaction. This is another way that natural law has been stated. Okay, and this has to do not only with physical reactions, but also with reactions governing behavior as well. In the New Age movement, you'll hear natural law sometimes talked about as the laws of attraction. They have a very super watered down explanation of natural law that leaves out a lot of pieces, a whole lot of pieces. And they're not telling the whole truth about what natural law is. And there's many outright misunderstandings of how these dynamics work. And often there could be some direct deceptions going on within that community as well. So I don't necessarily trust the New Age movement enough to pick up all of them and throw them a large distance. But it's not to say throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's some good things that are taught in that movement, but again, they don't go all the way. They don't go far enough in their explanation. So in the New Age movement, it's been called the laws of attraction, and some of the ways that it's been explained as is energy flows where attention goes. What we put our attention upon is what will ultimately manifest in our life, and that is very true. You've heard it expressed as you think, feel, and act, which are the three components of human consciousness, our thoughts, our emotions, and our actions. Those are the expressions for our consciousness, I should say. So we shall be. As people are thinking, feeling, and acting, that's what they're going to make of their experience in the world. So you've heard it most expressed in different traditions as karma. This is karmic law or moral law. When we're talking about natural law, we are talking about the laws that govern morality, moral law. It has everything to do with right and wrong action and what we reap as a result of right and wrong action. So this has been put down in the biblical terms as we reap that which we sow. What we sow, we will reap. What you throw down onto a field, the quality of that is what's going to grow and what's going to manifest and what you're going to have to eat, what you're going to have to deal with in your life. I think the best way that natural law has ever been expressed is in terms of the golden rule, the idea that we should treat others as we would ourselves prefer to be treated. An even better way of looking at the golden rule is in its negative aspect. See, when we say, do unto others as you would have done unto yourself, it can be kind of ambiguous because everybody might prefer to be treated a slightly different way. But if we state it in the negative sense, in other words, if we say, do not do unto others as you would not want to be done unto you, we get a much less ambiguous idea of how we should be behaving. In other words, you don't want harm done unto you. Don't do harm unto other people. I think the golden rule would have been so much more powerfully and beautifully stated in the negative or the apophatic sense. And a lot of ambiguity would be dissolved if we understood the golden rule in its apophatic variant, meaning its negative variant, saying what should not be done instead of what should be done. But nonetheless, I would say that the golden rule was a very proper and applicable way of looking at natural law in general. So the next thing that we would come to in trying to understand what natural law is how does this actually work? What are its expressions? Maybe before we do that, what we kind of also should clear up is that what we're talking about here is occulted knowledge. Natural law falls in the parameters of what people would call the occult. This is absolutely what we are talking about here. We are talking about occulted information, occulted knowledge. And of course, I'm sure the listeners to this fine show do have a proper understanding of the word occult. Occult simply means hidden. It does not mean evil or bad or negative. It means hidden, that which has been obscured from sight, that which has been hidden from view or veiled. It comes from the Latin verb occultare, meaning to hide or to conceal or to keep secret. The Latin adjective occultus means hidden, and that derives from the noun. The noun oculus means eye, the eye as in the eye in your head. Okay, so it's related to vision, and that's what the occult is. It means not easily seen. It is the world. We're talking about laws that exist in the unseen realm. This would kind of be the opposite of physics. We're talking about metaphysical laws, but nonetheless, they underlie and govern the physical domain. So they're physical laws too, and the same laws, the same methodologies for discovery that apply, meaning the scientific methodology, would also lie in understanding and discovering natural law. It's no different. This is a science. It's not a religion. It's not a belief system. So scientific methodology applies. You formulate a hypothesis, you do your observation, you test the hypothesis, and then you modify the hypothesis as you collect the data and then form a conclusion and share the conclusion. The scientific method applies here.
Wow, beautiful, Mark. That's excellent. And to those that are listening, this is absolutely key information if you're going to move forward in your expansion of consciousness. And I urge you to grab a friend, tell them to tune into the show. We're heading to break. We'll be back in a few minutes. We're here with Mark Passio. We're talking about natural law. So stay put and don't go anywhere. Welcome back, folks. You're listening to Syncretism with Santos Bonacci, and my name is David Whitehead, standing in. And I'm here tonight with my guest, Mark Passio, and we've already, in the first two segments, got into a great amount of detail discussing the topic of natural law and how it applies to, it is a universal principle that applies to all of us. And Mark, I mean, when we look around at the situation in the world, it appears to me that we have, of course, the natural organic planet Earth, which is, I believe, our mother, and it is a conscious being that we are all a part of. And then we have this synthetic web of a system that has been imprinted on top of it and then sold to us as if it is the truth. And this definitely pertains to the legal system, which has been, obviously corrupt for a long time, and we're seeing that coming out more and more and more. What is it that you think that keeps people in a belief, because that's exactly what it is, that this system that we currently are supporting is anything rational or sane in any stretch of the imagination?
Well, my answer to that might not be too popular, but I'll give it to you anyway. Ultimately, people have been worked into such a condition that they want to remain eternal spiritual infants. They do not want to learn and grow. They don't want to grow up because they subconsciously recognize that knowledge carries with it personal responsibility. And as individuals who want to abdicate responsibility, humanity is attempting to stay in a condition where they don't learn and grow, where they are not growing up. And that's not permitted in the cosmos. The cosmos is an evolving body that is being driven by a force of creation that is the evolutionary force. And the involutionary force, which is this thing that pushes against people to spur them to continue to grow and learn and move forward in a negative way. See, I call this, and it's been called by other teachers and researchers, pressure from above and pressure from below. Both of these forces are ultimately pushing us out of our slumber of ignorance. The involutionary force could be seen as these dark forces, okay, these, controlling forces. And that's helping ultimately to spur us on to break the eggshell, so to speak, and go with and into the slipstream of the evolutionary force that wants to propel us forward to learn and grow. See, one thing that's not tolerated in nature is stagnation. Stagnation, above all else, is not tolerated. And what humanity thinks that it's going to get away with doing erroneously and very naively is stagnating. We think we're going to say, no, we don't want to get this lesson. We don't want to learn and grow. We want to stay where we're at because it's comfortable here, because, we don't have to make our own decisions in this state of control. We can stay here and let other people do our thinking for us. We don't have to take true personal responsibility for our own actions. We can pass the buck on to someone else and say, oh, I'm just doing my job, or I'm just following the orders of this person over here. I'm just listening to what they were telling me. Well, that's not tolerated by the universe. The universe is going to accept that as an answer. It's going to put evolutionary and involutionary pressure on humanity until it finally says, enough is enough. I can't take this pressure. I'm going to voluntarily decide to grow up on my own and take personal responsibility for my own actions. And that's ultimately what natural law is all about, learning. It's about learning how we are collectively co-creating the reality that we are experiencing, whether it be extremely negative and painful, or whether it be extremely positive and uplifting and, creating a condition that nurtures further growth and development. So where I left off before is talking about natural law as occulted knowledge. We have to understand that we've been lied to and told that occult information is bad and evil precisely so we will not look into it and discover this information about natural law. What I call natural law often is the most deeply occulted information. This is the hidden gemstone. Okay, this is the gold pot at the end of the rainbow, so to speak, when it comes to occulted information. This is everything that dark occultists, meaning people that want to take information and hide it away and keep it forever from other people so that they, in their ego-driven mind state, in their fallen separatist worldview, their separation worldview, can maintain a power differential over other people through a knowledge differential. You hear the phrase, knowledge is power. Well, knowledge isn't power in and of itself. Knowledge, when it is applied, when it is used in a certain way, becomes power. It is converted into power through taking action on that knowledge. And if you have a group of people that can be looked at as ancient psychologists, is how I explain dark occultists, that know everything there is to know about how the human mind, the human psyche, the human motivations, how they operate. And they're of a mindset to want to use that knowledge to control other people. And they've kept that knowledge secreted, hidden away, occulted from other people. What kind of a number do you think that they can do on people who lack that knowledge of self, who don't understand how their own psyche operates, who don't understand their own motivational drives and desires? You could play the world's greatest manipulation game with that knowledge and create the biggest power differential that the world has ever seen through the exploitation of that knowledge. And that knowledge precisely is what I'm talking about, the knowledge of the occult. And this is the deepest part of that knowledge, because this natural law is the deepest part of that knowledge, because what it deals with is how the methods by which human beings are collectively co-creating the reality that we all experience. See, this idea in the New Age movement that I call a deception or a total misunderstanding of natural law, of the laws of attraction, people in the New Age movement are often being taught that they create their own reality, meaning separately, individually. You know, when it comes to the dynamics that are taking place in the whole world, nothing could be farther from the truth. Each individual is not creating a different shared reality on the earth. You are creating your reality in your life based on things that affect you. Let's say your diet. That's totally within your control. Even with all the things that are going on with food, you could still get access to clean food, and you could take control over your health through your nutrition. So you're creating your reality when it comes to, you know, physical health of the body through nutrition. Now, of course, there's environmental variables, quality of air, things like that. Of course, that's going to affect and play into health as well. So even that, there's dynamics that are affected by other people as well. So we can play a role in creating the reality of our health to a great extent, maybe not to a total extent. But when it comes to the dynamic that's taking place in the world, we have to understand each individual is not creating a separate reality for what's playing out on a grand level, on a mass scale. This is the ultimate. This would be the ultimate in a total runaway thinking, in a sense that each individual, they think that they're creating a separate reality for each one of them. And this is what's being taught in the New Age movement, or at least it's how it's being construed. In reality, how natural law goes to work in our lives is in the aggregate sense, meaning if the vast majority of people believe a certain thing and are acting upon that belief, then the tendency overwhelmingly is going to be to create that reality in the aggregate, in the mass scale for the entire society. And only when a certain amount of people would stop thinking that way and start thinking a different way could that dynamic be changed on a mass scale. This is what has been called the critical mass number, or the tipping point. Okay? So we have to understand what natural law is explaining, what the dynamics of natural law are explaining, if we discover them and understand them, is how people are co-creating the reality that we're living in the aggregate sense. And that is always driven by numbers, by the amount. You'll often also hear in the New Age movement, it only takes a tiny little amount of people to make mass change happen. This also is not true. As the majority of people are thinking and believing, they're holding a dynamic in place based on their belief. This is why a quantum shift is called precisely that, a quantum shift. Okay? The word quantum, look it up in a Latin dictionary, it means amount. An amount is what the word quantum means. So when we say a quantum shift in consciousness, that means that a certain amount of people have to make that dynamic change occur.
Oh, I couldn't agree more, Mark. That's such a to bring up, because a lot of people are disillusioned with the fact that we definitely need to have this massive amount of people, because here we are in the situation that we're in. Well, we're at the top of the hour. I really want to continue that train of thought when we get back. Heading into the second hour when we get back from the break, folks. So don't go anywhere. Stay where you are. You're listening to Syncretism with Santos Bonacci, except it's David Whitehead hosting for him. And don't go anywhere. Be right back. Listen to American Freedom Radio. My name is David Whitehead, and I'm having an absolutely fascinating discussion with my guest tonight, Mark Passio. His website, of course, is whatonearthishappening.com. You most definitely need to go and check out his presentations, his podcasts. He's got a ton of information on his site. I'm constantly referencing it, and I think that it's definitely a great place to go to learn more about the subjects that we're discussing this evening. And I agree with Mark that the topic of natural law is one of the most important discussions and most important topics that we need to dissect and help people understand, especially given the time that we're in and the climate that we're in today's age. And, the first hour goes pretty quick. So Mark, we're going to try to get into as much as we can here for people in the second hour. And maybe we can just continue where we left off in explaining some of the more detailed aspects of natural law.
Sure. Well, I guess where we can go next is talking about how natural law actually expresses in our life. What are the expressions for this governing dynamic that is at work in our lives? And this can help people really to understand a lot about what natural law really is and how we can work with this dynamic in nature to basically change the result that we're getting in our lives and that we're actually putting out there to then have a ripple effect in other people's lives. Because again, as we're talking about, we're not creating our reality individually as an individual. We are together co-creating the reality that we all experience, the shared reality that we all experience here on Earth. So the expressions for natural law, I break down, if you could envision them, broken down into two columns. You have a positive column and a negative column. And what we're going to basically do is just go down the column from the top. The top of the column we're going to look at as, we're going to say, this is where we start. And then we move forward in time, and where we end up is at the bottom, the base of this column, and that's what we ended up with, okay? So if you start in the first left-hand column and you look at the positive expression for natural law. These are all the positive expressions, okay? We'll go straight down this list and look at what the positive expressions are, okay? You first start with a generative polarity. So what the word generative means is creative, okay? This is a force or a polarity that actually you are working with to create something. And the positive generative polarity is called love. Now, this dynamic of natural law, love, has nothing whatsoever to do with Hollywood style, romance, novel style love. That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the expansive force of consciousness. It's the thing that makes you open up, that makes consciousness open and expand and say, I want to take in information. I want to be open. I want to explore. It's the opposite of being shut down. Okay. It's the flowering of consciousness. That's what love really is about. It's about being open to the experience, the learning experiences of the world. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about love. The positive expression that is what we create with, the generative expression of natural law, the generative polarity, I should say, generative polarity. So if we are open, if our consciousness is open, if we are open-minded, if we are open-hearted, and we want to learn and we want to grow, we will move into the beginning expression for natural law. And I call this the initiative expression, or in other words, the beginning stages of learning and growing. And this is truth seeking. You will say, because I have an open mind and heart, because I want to learn and grow, because I want to know, then I will seek truth. That I will take my ego out of the way about what I want to believe and what I want to accept as being true, and I will look at what actually is true. Regardless of whether it's positive, negative, dark, uncomfortable, comfortable, it doesn't matter. If it's true, my consciousness will go there and accept it, take it in, deal with it, and do what I need to do with that information. And what that process is called the acquisition of knowledge. So the initiative expression for natural law in the positive sense is knowledge, or in other words, truth-seeking, and then gaining knowledge as a result of truth-seeking. When we do that, we come to understand the self. When we understand the self fully, we become a being that isn't contradictive, isn't in a state of internal contradiction. We aren't in internal opposition or internal polarity. We are a whole being. And a whole being moves into what I term the internal positive expression for natural law. So this is something that is within the self. It's not outside the self. It's not external to the self. It is an internal state of being. And this internal state of being is called sovereignty. When we become a being that is non-contradictory, and as we think, as we feel, and as we act are unified and operating as one. In other words, if we think and feel a certain way, our actions do not betray those thoughts and emotions. As we think, so we feel, so we act. And a being that is in this state of sovereignty, okay, of self-mastery, of non-oppositional consciousness, can be said to be the ruler of themselves. We are our own master. We are our own ruler in that state of consciousness. And unfortunately, because most people today aren't in that state, that's why we're ruled. That's why we are ruled from without. That's why we have externalized our power to other people, because we don't even understand what sovereignty is. You know, you look at the word sovereignty, it's so important. You know, it comes from two Latin words. The Latin adverb super, S-U-P-E-R. That comes down in English. The V isn't in classical Latin. So, you know, that phonetically changes in English and becomes a V. So, sover, which is the first part of sovereign, S-O-V-E-R, in Latin would be transliterated, or actually the etymological root of sover in the word sovereign is super, S-U-P-E-R in Latin. This adverb in Latin means above, okay? And the second part of the word sovereign, reign, R-E-I-G-N, the N part of the word sovereign comes from the Latin noun regnum, R-E-G-N-U-M, regnum. Regnum means rulership or control, as in a king ruling his subjects or a master ruling his slaves. Rulership or external control over another person. That's what regnum means in Latin. Now, if you put these two words together, super regnum, or sovereign, super regnum, sovereign, it means above external rulership or control. It means not ruled from without. What sovereignty means is ruled from within. It means that we are self-owner, self-ownership, self-mastery. We're ruled from within. So think about that. If you're ruled from within, and then there's only one master of self, you own yourself. You are your own internal ruler. I call this state internal monarchy. Monarch, the term monarch comes from the prefix prefix mon, M-O-N, which means one, and the word archon in Greek, that means ruler. So monarch means one ruler, not two rulers, not multiple rulers like an oligarchy, okay? But a monarchy means one ruler. So a monarch is a king or a queen. So a sovereign is one ruler, a king or a queen, and it is the ruler of the self. That's all a sovereign can rule. They rule themselves, a true sovereign. Okay? So what sovereign means, another thing that sovereign ultimately means, if it breaks down to, in its etymological roots, meaning above control, above external rulership or control, what that means is that you're not subject to anyone else, or you're not a slave. When people make a big deal about the word sovereign, oh, he's claiming to be a sovereign. You know, all the word sovereign means, when you break it down, is not a slave. So everybody on the earth should know that they are a sovereign. The slavery is always illegitimate. Slavery is never legitimate. It can never be morally justified or legitimized. It's always illegitimate. So everybody, whether anybody knows it or not, accepts it or not, regardless of what claims are made to the contrary, everyone is free and not ruled by someone else. Unfortunately, when people are so ignorant that they don't even know what the word sovereign means, and they don't really know that nobody has legitimacy to rule over them and to keep them as a slave, they can be duped into accepting the claims of a slave master, of an owner, that would say that I own you. And, I have the inherent moral authority to rule over you, and you have the moral obligation to obey my commands. And this is where we're at as a species, believing in this false religion called authority, that certain people are masters who can keep other people, and certain people are slaves who have the moral obligation to obey the masters. To go back to this breakdown of the expressions of natural law, which I moved away from to talk about sovereignty for a moment, this is the internal expression. Sovereignty is the internal expression in the positive sense of natural law. I call it internal monarchy. Now, when we develop that on a mass scale, we move toward an external expression in the world. Because again, we're talking about the principle of correspondence here. That which is above is like or similar to that which is below. In other words, the universe is self-similar across scales. Or another way of saying this would be the microcosm is a reflection of the macrocosm, and the macrocosm is a reflection of the microcosm. So as all the individual units of consciousness, the individuated beings, are expressing something in the aggregate, that becomes what the society is like on the mass scale. That's the law of correspondence. So as people would express sovereignty and become self-rulers and not cede their power and abdicate their power to other people and their personal responsibility to other people, we would see many people acting as sovereigns, living as sovereigns as we're truly intended to live, as beings that are not slaves and who are truly rule themselves because they're not contradictory beings. Their thoughts, emotions, and actions are in unity consciousness, are operating as one. The external expression that would then result in the so-called outside world, which again is just a reflection of what's going on inside the individuated minds of all the people of a society, this externalized expression that would then manifest is freedom. Freedom is nobody ruling anybody else. In other words, there's no external masters. There's no external rulers over other people. There's no master-slave relationship in freedom. Freedom means no masters, no rulers, no slaves. That's what true freedom is. So this is external anarchy. Anarchy comes from two Greek words. The prefix in Greek, a or an, when you add it to any word, means the negation of or the absence of, or in other words, not present, not there. You add that onto the Greek word archon, the second part of anarchy, anarchy, archon. The Greek word archon, as we've already said, means ruler or master. The word anarchy has nothing to do with chaos, has nothing to do with the absence of rules, has nothing to do with the biggest gang of warlords ruling the roost. That's not what anarchy means. That's the obfuscated connotation of anarchy that is given to people through endless repetition to obfuscate the real definition of the word, which is no rulers, the absence of rulers, an archon. So no archons, no masters, no rulers. And in other words, no master-slave relationship. That's what true freedom is. True freedom is the absence of rulership, of a master-slave relationship, externally ruling, some people externally ruling over other people. And that state is anarchy, anarchon, the absence of rulers. Anarchy does not mean no rules. There's always going to be rules because natural law is always in effect. You can never not exist. As long as you're in this universe, you cannot exist in a state where there are no rules. It's an impossibility. It is against all the laws of nature. So there's always rules. We shouldn't have rulers. We shouldn't have people who prop themselves up as rulers claiming to have authority over other people. If we can get away from that, we would have true external anarchy, which is the absence of rulers or masters, hence true freedom. This is the external expression of natural law. Finally, what would result if we were able to move through these polarities of the polarity of love, which leads to truth-seeking, which leads to knowledge, which leads to internal sovereignty, internal monarchy. So that's what sovereignty is, not being a slave, truly mastering yourself. Freedom would result in the external world around us at the macrocosmic level, and the expression, the ultimate manifestation of that would be order. Order is the end result, or what we would call good, what we would call that which we want to experience that does not lead to self-inflicted suffering. Order, goodness. These are the positive expressions for natural law. Now let's contrast this with the opposite of these things, with the negative expressions. And we'll go down this column to see how this works. What you also have to keep in mind as we do this is one column can never lead to the other column. In other words, if I start with the polarity of love, I can never cross into the negative expressions for natural law. It's a one-way street. It's a one-way flow. So we'll pick up the negative expressions on the other side.
Well, that was perfectly timed, actually, and I think it's definitely time to contrast this so people can have an idea of how this really works and maybe look back in history and see how this hasn't worked in the past because of this obfuscation that we've been experiencing. So don't go anywhere, folks. We're here with Mark Passio. We'll be back in a few short minutes. We're here with Mark Passio, my guest tonight, and we were just breaking down some key information regarding the natural law. We've been getting into it in great depth tonight. And just before we move forward, I just wanted to add there that as we're discussing this issue, I really want people to consider history in general of the human race as we look back in time and we see how again and again and again humanity just continually gives their power away to rulers over them instead of being empowered to rule themselves. And it seems like it's been the few that have had the courage and the bravery to stand up to actually say, no, you can actually rule yourself. You can empower yourself and stop giving your life, your blood, your money, your resources, and all of your energy away to these oligarchs and these rulers who would set themselves in between us and our creator or the natural law or the universe or whichever way you wish to express that. And so here we are in this marvelous time where we have so many great teachers like Mark and so many great people out there that are waking up to this information and empowering themselves to take back their own personal sovereignty, to ask those deeper questions and not just follow along with what they're being told. And so I just think it's so important that we understand this at a deep, deep level before we even think about trying to go out there and help others. Because sometimes if we've got a lot of toxicity within, if we haven't fully come to those realizations within, we might actually be causing more damage than good in the end of the day. So it's important that we continue to expand and to keep asking these questions and keep searching this truth. So Mark, we just want to go ahead and continue. We were just going to get into the negative side of these things.
Sure. David, that was beautifully said, and I just want to add on to that a little bit before we continue. It is precisely because this information has been occulted from humanity for so many years that we do not understand how this all works, and so that we have been kept ignorant enough to continue to externalize our power, thinking that somehow that's going to get us what we want, when in fact all that could ever do is bring to us what we say we don't want. And this has everything to do with the reality that we are collectively, again, co-creating, not each individual creating it, but as a society, what we're doing in the aggregate to create the shared reality that we experience here on the earth. So we were looking at the positive expressions for natural law in the last segment. Now let's look at the negative expressions. Let's look at all the polar opposites of what we were talking about before and what will happen if those things manifest in our lives, if we allow them to manifest through the very first generative polarity, which is the polar opposite of the expansive force, which we called love, okay, the negative generative force in the universe, which is fear. This is the diametrically opposed force to love. People will often look at it as anger or hatred as the opposite of love. Okay, it's not. Fear is the opposite of love. Okay, hatred would be a manifestation of fear. Fear is the force that actually closes down the mind. You know, in the movie Dune, I love how it's worded that fear is the mind killer. It is the little death that brings total annihilation. You know, that's what fear is all about. It's the force that shuts us down, that doesn't want us to look at what is real, that doesn't want to allow us to look at ourselves and our own behavior. People not wanting to look at truth have to be in fear. People who are ruled have to be kept in fear. Fear is the force that does not allow us to see clearly what is actually there. Fear is the force that keeps us in illusion and keeps the consciousness and the heart closed to change, closed to information. So that's the generative polarity on the negative side. Now, when this goes to work at the very beginning, or in other words, the initiative expression in the negative sense, again, we don't want to look at what's there. We want to engage in illusion. So engaging in illusion and refusal to look at what is actually there, we could look at as the refusal of truth. And we do that through fear. People fear, and then they don't want to look at what is real. They want to stay in denial. And ultimately, they want to stay in ignorance through this fear. That's what causes people to want to stay in ignorance. So the initiative expression, if we are in a state of fear, we refuse truth and we go into the state called ignorance. That's the initiative negative expression of natural law, ignorance.
And it's so important to point out there, Mark, that people, this is a choice that they actually make. Whether they,
Sure.
it's like that quote. I don't know what the name of the movie is that's coming out. It's that new Will Smith movie. Anyways, there was a good quote that was kind of talking about fear in that clip there. That was just saying that, you know, we understand that danger is real, but fear is ultimately a choice.
That's correct.
And it's something that people, they fall into it because they feel like a victim. They feel disempowered, as you were talking about. And then they view the world as if they don't have any kind of choice whatsoever.
Exactly.
And then the rest of their life just continues to unfold in this illusory state of mind. And then I would say that their life is then continuing as an illusion. And then we look around the world and we see that this is evidenced everywhere.
Yeah. And that all comes down to living in fear. And when you're living in fear, you can't develop any self-respect. Self-respect only comes out of self-love. So we're kept in fear precisely so we won't develop the self-respect to come out of our ignorance. You know, and this is a cycle because then people feel shamed and they don't develop self-respect and then they beat themselves up and then they stay in fear and go into deeper levels of ignorance and continue to refuse the truth because they're saying, there's too much for me to learn now. I'm too far behind, or I'm too stupid to learn it. No, people aren't born stupid. They have the capacity to learn. What we need is the desire to learn. That's the desire to want to seek the truth. You know, when we continue to refuse truth, we are making a willful decision of our own free will to remain ignorant. And that is something that we should not feel good about because there is a choice. And right now, the opportunity is before us because information has never been so free-flowing in our world. This is a divine opportunity, I would go so far as to say, with the amount the ease of information flow and the amount of information that is flowing in the world today, we have no excuse anymore to remain ignorant. So that's the initiative expression in the negative sense. Now, the negative internal expression. So when we are in fear, we stay in ignorance and refuse truth, something happens within us. We go into this state of internal confusion. Confusion takes over. This is the internal negative expression. We don't know who we are. Okay, we are ignorant of self. And that means inside we are in a state of perpetual confusion. And this is the force that fear works within us to get us to externalize our power. Confusion I call internal anarchy. That means there's no ruler in the house of self. There's no ruler within. That's a very bad thing. We need to be our own rulers within us, to take control of the kingdom of ourselves, to understand the self, to understand our psyche, to understand our driving motivations, to work with the self because we have self-respect. We have self-love. We want to know the truth.
And that's why, sorry to cut in there, Mark, but that's why people are given that only that one side of that definition of anarchy, is that it's only displayed as being only that, as if, you know, because we have people that are not able to rule themselves properly and they don't have those capacities, they're just running in the world causing chaos. And this is the only image that's given to people. So they again think, well, there's no alternative than to have somebody that's in some way better than me or smarter than me or whatever propaganda they want to put out there to continue to rule over others, right?
And all that will do is perpetuate people not coming into a state of knowledge of self, because they'll say, well, I have this crutch. I don't need to learn about me. I don't need to learn about what's going on in me. Somebody else will figure out all these problems for me, and I won't have to learn. And again, that's stagnation, and that's not allowed by the universe. You know, that leads ultimately to death so that new growth can happen. And that may be very well what humanity is choosing, you know, because the universe will move on if we ultimately say, we're not going to take this lesson. You know, it can, you know, do something to cause a culling of humanity so that, you know, it's like weeds choking something that's growing in a garden. You know, eventually the gardener will weed the garden, and then they'll make new room for new growth. I certainly would like humanity to choose a different outcome than that, but, you know, it seems to me that people seem to be so stubborn where we're at that they will choose death over looking at the self, anything to avoid it. You know, I hope that trend is slowly turning around. Time will tell. But to go back to the idea that you brought up, yes, this is the only way we ever hear about anarchy. But, you know, if you really look at the term and the way I'm using it, internal anarchy, it's the same thing as I said before. Anarchy simply means the absence of a ruler. And we need a ruler within, not without ourselves. We need to be our own ruler within, meaning we rule ourselves individually, meaning we exercise self-control, meaning we master the self. That's what internal anarchy is the opposite of. That means there's no master at home. There's no master in the house of the self. That's a very bad thing. That is something that is only going to give us more of what we do not want and lead to more self-inflicted suffering. So this negative internal expression of confusion ultimately then creates an outward expression in the macrocosmic world in which we live. And that is the state of control. This is the negative external expression. So control is what I call external monarchy, meaning literally there is a monarchy or a one centralized source of control that is governing every aspect of our lives. You know, this is what has been called the New World Order, the Dark New World Order, one world government, or just simply slavery. I mean, that's what external monarchy is. It's one person telling you that they own you, that they are your owner, your master, your ruler. That's external monarchy. And that's the state of total control. This is the negative external expression that results when we stay in fear, refuse the truth, and therefore remain in ignorance, have no internal ruler, therefore we're in this state of confusion that I call internal anarchy, and then in that state, people externalize their power and easily come under control from without by those who would seek to control them. So what we end up with in that state is the negative manifestation, which is chaos. There is no order. Chaos results from control. Control can never create order or anything that's good, because controlling other people is always based on violence and coercion. It's based on using force in a way that you don't have the right to use it, to compel, to constrain, to coerce other people against their free will. That's what control is all about. And that only ever leads to slavery. And that is the state of chaos, or what we would call evil. It's the opposite of everything we consider good. And it's the opposite of what we say we want. We think that there needs to continue to be control to get order or good. And that can never happen, because that's the opposite expression of natural law. It's like saying, I'm going to wet these clothes to dry them. It's madness. You know, I want to wear dry clothes. So instead of hanging them in the sun, I'm going to go throw them in a bucket of water and then try to put them on and have them be dry. Well, good luck with that. You can do that for all eternity, and it'll never happen. And it's the same thing. We think we're going to create order or goodness from a state of control. It cannot be done. Not only will it not ever be done, it can not ever be done. It's an impossibility, because it flies in the face of law. Law works a certain way to bring a certain expression. If we want to create order, it has to be done through opening up our consciousness, seeking the truth, acquiring knowledge, understanding our sovereignty, coming into our self-rulership, letting freedom reign in the external world, and therefore we will have true order or goodness. In the opposite sense, if we stay in fear and ignorance, confusion will abound inside of us, control will take over outside, and we can only ever create chaos that way. So those are the expressions for natural law. That's how natural law actually works in our lives. And in a nutshell, what you've just heard there is what dark occultism seeks to hide from humanity forever.
When we talk about dark occultists, we could touch on that a little bit for people, just to get an idea of what some of the mechanisms are in place and who these people are. I use that term lightly, but who these people, beings are that might be in influencing this control over our reality, or in a sense taking advantage of the situation that we sort of fallen asleep at the wheel.
Yeah, they constitute a priest class. And again, the best way to look at this priest class of this demented religion that is about control, comprised of psychopathic people, is ancient psychologists. That's the best metaphor that I can give for people to understand what they really are. They're people who gain the knowledge of how the psyche works and were able to, at some point in the past, sequester it from other people, to keep it hidden from other people so that they could, in their fallen state of consciousness, use it as a power differential. That's who the dark occultists are in a general sense, in a general overview. But what they're really keeping us back from, through their propaganda and their media and the endless distractions that they put before people, is, and it sounds strange to even say, because when you say this to people, they don't quite understand that they can't even conceive that this is what the world is, that it's this simple, is that people don't know the difference between right and wrong. That's what we're ultimately talking about. When we're talking about natural law, what we mean is the laws of morality and the governing dynamics having to do with our free will decisions upon which we base our behaviors when we choose either right action or wrong action. And we wouldn't be in the mess that we're in as a society, as a species, if we truly knew the difference between right and wrong. And when you say this to people, they become very offended. They actually respond in a very reactionary way in being told that they don't really deeply, fully, for themselves know the difference between right and wrong. I mean, you just try to say that to somebody, and you'll start an argument really easily, and they'll take it very offensively. Look, if you went back into, I give the example, if you went back into Nazi Germany, okay, in let's say 1938, and you attempted to sit down with a German, an average, everyday, working-class German citizen who was a sincere supporter of the Nazi Party, and you tried to explain to them that they were not a moral human being for what they were supporting, they would look at you like you were crazy. They would tell you to get lost. They would get very offended to you, almost to the point of violence, because you were telling them that what they were doing and supporting was morally wrong. They would have thought, this is absolutely right. This is what the government says is right and good, and I believe this. This is my belief system. I believe I'm doing the right thing. And they would say, I am a moral person. I do have conscience. I have conscience. I know the difference between right and wrong, and I'm choosing the right over the wrong. That's what they would have told you. Almost everyone in that society would have said that. And of course, we know that they would have been wrong. That's not the case. They didn't know the real difference between right and wrong, but they thought they did. And this is like where our society is. We believe that we're somehow a moral people. We believe that individually we know the difference between right and wrong, when that's not possible, because if that were the case, on a mass scale, the world wouldn't be the way that it is, and our society wouldn't be the way that it is, falling apart into totalitarianism. That can only happen when the majority of people are immoral, when the majority of people do not really truly know the difference between right and wrong. And that's what natural law really is, a method of discovery for the objective differences between right and wrong. What we have to understand about natural law is that within it, there's the concept of objective morality. We, as a people, particularly in Western civilization, believe in this notion of moral relativism, that right and wrong are constructs of man. And again, nothing could be farther from the truth. Right and wrong are part of natural law, which means that they exist independently and inherently in creation. They are independent from man's perception of them. Right and wrong would exist if humanity disappeared in the blink of an eye. They would still exist. They are inherent to creation. They are not based on the perceptions of humanity, as people have been led to believe by our current system, by our current culture and indoctrination methods that we're living under. Moral or right means that it is always based in truth. It is correct. That's why we use the word correct. We use the word right, to mean both correct and moral. Correct means that it's based in truth, and moral means that it's based in natural law, meaning that when something is a right, it's an action that does no harm to other beings. So an action that is a right does not cause harm, does not result in harm to others. Hence, it is moral, it is based in natural law, and it is correct. It is how we should be behaving. It is right action. Okay? Wrong is always not based in truth. It's based on the rejection of truth, because it's always based in fear, and it's not moral. Therefore, it's not based in natural law. Whenever actions are done that aren't based in natural law or truth, it results in harm to other beings. The harms that we can do. See, we need to understand right and wrong in the negative sense once again. Rights are always better understood in the negative instead of the affirmative. You don't want to try to define what a right is. You want to define what a right is not. So you'll notice when I said a right is an action that does not result in harm to other beings. It's always the negative in there. That's that apophatic pathway to the truth, the negative inquiry. In other words, trying to understand what something is by the process of elimination, of saying what it is not, and then coming to know it better through that elimination process. Truth is a destructive process. It chips away at the false until you get to what's really there. You take the illusion away, you take the falsehood away, and then you get to the core of truth, which lies at the core. So It's better to understand a right in the negative sense, to define what a right is by defining what a wrong is. So anything that falls outside of wrongdoing, which is a very actual limited scope, if we really think about it. There's only so many ways you can do wrong to another person. There's an infinite ways we could express our rights, but there are certain things that we should not be doing to someone else. We should not be compelling them against their will. We should not be doing physical violence to them without any cause. We should not be usurping their rights. We should not be harming them through assault. We shouldn't be raping. We shouldn't be stealing from people. We shouldn't be damaging people's property. There's a limited scope of wrongdoing, and it's often been expressed as the 4 overarching transgressions against natural law. Murder and assault would also fall under that, meaning attempting to do a bodily harm to someone else. Rape, taking the sexual free will association from someone else against their will. Theft, stealing someone's property, and trespass, taking someone's security and taking their rights from them, okay, to be safe in their being. So if we look at those as the major transgressions that we can do against someone else, murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, okay, it's all forms of harm. These are harmful actions. We don't have any right to take actions like that. And each one of them is a form of theft. When we boil it down, each one of those transgressions against natural law is a form of theft. Murdering somebody is stealing their life when it doesn't belong to you. And again, assaulting someone, that's stealing their right to remain unharmed in their body if they've conducted no wrongdoing. So you don't have a right to do that. That's a form of theft. Rape is stealing someone's free will association through sexual coercion. You don't have a right to do that, to steal their free will in that capacity and their right to remain unharmed in their body. A theft is just that. It's taking something that doesn't belong to you, taking property that doesn't belong to you. And trespass is taking someone's security and their being in their lair, their living conditions, their living space. So these are all forms of theft. So you could boil it all down and say all wrongdoings ultimately fall under one banner of wrongdoing, which is theft.
Well, exactly, Mark. And the music's back again. And unfortunately, our time was short tonight. Those 2 hours sure flew by. But I just want to thank you again, from the bottom of my heart, Mark, for coming on, for sharing this very, very key and valuable information. I think it was a terrific way to end my post here on Santos' show. And for the listeners that are waiting for his return, he should be back for next week. And it was just an absolute honor to serve here and to be a servant of truth, to bring these people to you, and I really just hope I show justice. So thank you, Mark.
David, I want to thank you for having me on this evening, and people can check out my work at whatonearthishappening.com. Thank you for the opportunity to be on the show tonight.
Excellent, and definitely go check it out, folks, and thanks for tuning in.